My name is Emma. I'm 34 years old. And what I'm about to tell you still feels like a nightmare I haven't fully woken up from. On what was supposed to be one of the happiest nights of my life, my engagement party, I discovered that my fiancé had been cheating on me. But not just with anyone, with my own sister. And to make it worse, my family didn't just forgive her, they stood behind her. Before I share how their choices led to debt collectors banging on their doors and a panicked 911 call, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to the fairy tale that shattered in seconds. The backyard glowed with soft amber light from strings of fairy lights wrapped delicately around the trees and pergola. They swayed gently in the summer breeze, casting flickering shadows across the smiling faces of our guests. It was a picturesque evening, warm, filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and toasts that echoed with love and congratulations. That night was meant to mark the beginning of something beautiful between Ryan and me. We had been together for nearly 5 years, and this celebration was a declaration to the world that we were building a future together. Everything felt perfect, almost surreal. I drifted through the evening like I was weightless. Hugs from old friends, heartfelt speeches, and bubbly champagne blended into a golden haze of joy. Ryan had just finished delivering a moving toast that made several guests tear up, including me. Afterward, I slipped inside to fix my makeup, which had run a bit from happy tears. My heart was so full, it felt like it was glowing. Every second of that night had been steeped in meaning. When I returned outside, still smiling and reapplying my lipstick, I noticed something odd. Ryan and Nicole, my younger sister by 2 years, were nowhere in sight. I scanned the crowd, expecting to see Ryan laughing with his buddies, or Nicole chatting near the dessert table. But neither of them was there. A small wave of irritation began to bubble in my chest, though I brushed it off. I wanted to be with Ryan, to celebrate together as a couple. This was our moment. Everyone was here for us. I checked the kitchen, empty. The living room, also quiet. A friend caught my eye and casually pointed toward the side yard. "I think I saw them head toward the old oak," she said with a light-hearted grin. I nodded, forcing a smile, and followed the narrow gravel path that curved around the house. The music and laughter from the party began to fade as I rounded the corner. The oak tree stood tall and familiar, the same one where my dad had once hung a tire swing for us when we were children. A breeze rustled its leaves, and the shadows underneath seemed almost too dark. I squinted. That's when I saw them, tucked in the shadows, silhouetted by the dim ambient glow, were 2 figures. At first, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My mind refused to register it. But then I saw Nicole's arms. They were draped around Ryan's neck, her body pressed closely against his. And Ryan, my fiancé, was kissing her. It wasn't a fleeting kiss or an innocent hug. It was intense, intimate, a kiss filled with longing and familiarity. The kind of kiss shared by people in love, people who think no one is watching. My entire world fell silent. The party faded into static. The lights, the sounds, the air itself, everything collapsed in that moment. My chest tightened. I couldn't breathe. The scene in front of me didn't belong in my life. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's tragedy, like I was watching a drama unfold on screen. But it was real. Too real. They hadn't noticed me. I stood frozen, eyes wide, heart hammering in disbelief. Then I backed away, my legs barely supporting me. My hand shot up to cover my mouth and muffle the rising sobs. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. I ran. I ducked behind bushes, past the garden, through the back gate, and down the street. My engagement dress, pale blue and delicate, now felt like a cruel costume, an emblem of a joy I no longer possessed. My pearl earrings bounced against my neck with every frantic step. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't stop. I ran until my feet ached and the lights of a hotel appeared ahead. The lobby was sterile and cold, but it felt like a safe harbor in the chaos. I handed over my credit card with trembling hands, my signature barely legible. The clerk didn't ask questions. Bless her for that. When I got to the room, I collapsed face first onto the bed. The silence felt deafening. The betrayal hit me in waves, each stronger than the last. I curled up, clutching my phone like a lifeline. It buzzed. A message from Ryan. Buzz. One from Nicole. Buzz. Another from Ryan. My thumb hovered over the screen. Did I want to know what they had to say? Could anything make it worse? Or better? I didn't know what to do, so I did what I always did in moments of crisis. I called my best friend Sarah. She answered on the first ring, voice tight with worry. Emma? Where are you? What happened? I tried to speak, but my throat felt raw. Tears spilled out again, this time in choked sobs. I couldn't hold it in. I saw them, I finally whispered. Ryan and Nicole, they were kissing. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Sarah exhaled sharply, her voice turning from concerned to furious. That son of a... They're texting me, I interrupted, my voice shaking. I can't even open them. Okay, Sarah said firmly. You don't have to do this alone. Open them. Read them out loud to me. Whatever they say, we'll face it together. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. Her strength steadied me. I opened Ryan's message first. Emma, I'm so sorry you saw that. I never wanted it to happen that way. It's been going on for a while. I proposed to you, thinking I could get over my feelings for Nicole, but I can't. I thought you were just a temporary distraction? A temporary distraction? 5 years of love, plans, vacations, shared holidays, laughter, dreams? Reduced to that. My stomach twisted. I opened Nicole's message next. I know this hurts, but you need to understand. Ryan and I are soulmates. It's fate. We didn't mean for this to happen, but we couldn't deny it anymore. Fate. She used the word fate, like it justified everything, as if falling in love with your sister's fiancé was some tragic, star-crossed romance instead of betrayal. No apology, no guilt, just entitlement. And as I lay there, shaking with rage and heartbreak, a long-buried memory rose to the surface. I was 16, getting ready for junior prom. My grandmother had passed down her silver locket to me, a delicate vintage piece I cherished. Nicole, then 14, begged to wear it to her school dance the week before. I refused. It was too special. She threw a tantrum. My mother chimed in, Emma, don't be so selfish. She's your little sister. Let her borrow it. My father barely looked up from his paper. Don't make a scene, he muttered, so I gave in. Of course, she lost it. And when I cried, my parents didn't scold me. They comforted her. It was just an accident, honey. Don't make your sister feel bad. That sentence echoed in my memory like a curse. My pain had always been treated like an afterthought, something inconvenient, messy, not to be dwelt upon. Nicole's emotions, on the other hand, were to be protected, nurtured, and worshipped. It had always been like that growing up. She was the radiant one, charming, vivacious, the golden child whose every whim was met with applause. And me? I was the sensible one, the mature one, the one who knew better and was expected to be better. If Nicole were a blazing sun, I was the quiet moon expected to orbit her. So, when she took my fiancé just as easily as she'd taken my grandmother's locket all those years ago, I shouldn't have been surprised, but I was. And the expectation remained the same. Accept it, don't make a fuss, be the bigger person. I spent the next 3 days holed up in that bland, impersonal hotel room. The curtains stayed drawn. I lived on vending machine snacks and barely tasted the meals that Sarah brought me. She visited every day, wrapping me in the warm, non-judgmental presence only a true friend can offer. Some days she spoke. Other times we sat in silence. She never pressured me. She simply stayed. I ignored every call from my parents. My phone log showed dozens of missed calls, mostly from Mom, some from Dad, and an uncomfortable number from Nicole. I didn't open any messages. Eventually, I realized I couldn't hide from reality forever. The pain had rooted itself deep inside, but I knew I had to reclaim control over something. Anything. So I drove home. My intention was simple: gather my belongings and get out for good. As I turned into the driveway, a cold dread gripped my chest. My parents' car was parked right there beside Nicole's. I stared at it for a long moment, pulse racing, hands gripping the wheel like it was the only thing holding me together. Still, I got out, legs heavy, breath shallow, and opened the front door, and there they were, all four of them, lounging in the living room like some twisted portrait of domestic bliss. My parents, my sister, Ryan. They sat comfortably on the sofas, cups of coffee in hand, as if nothing had happened. They looked like a family, my family. Only I wasn't part of the scene. My mother spotted me first. She stood up, setting her mug on the table, and approached with that face, that mask of feigned compassion and motherly concern that always made me feel like the problem. "Oh, Emma, sweetheart, we were so worried about you," she said softly. Worried. The words struck me like a slap. They looked anything but. Nicole and Ryan sat side by side on the love seat, their fingers intertwined like a matching set. And as I watched, frozen in the doorway, they leaned into one another and shared a tender kiss. It was obscene. I wanted to scream. My mother, moved by the moment, dabbed her eyes with a tissue. A tear rolled down her cheek. Not for me, not for my shattered engagement, but because she found it beautiful. "Isn't it wonderful," she said dreamily, "that they found each other?" I blinked. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My voice barely emerged, raspy and shaking. Wonderful. He was my fiancé. 30 minutes before he was kissing her, he was giving a toast about our future together. And you think this is wonderful? My father stood now, his expression hard and disappointed, the look he always reserved for when I failed to meet their invisible expectations. "That's enough, Emma. Stop behaving like a child. What's done is done. Your sister is happy now. You should be happy for her." Happy for her? My fingers curled into fists and my voice rose, finally cracking under the weight of 5 years of betrayal. "She blew up my life. He blew up my life. And you're sitting here having coffee with them like they're heroes in some romance novel. What is wrong with you?" Nicole's voice cut through the tension, soft and wounded. The same tone she always used to deflect responsibility. "You're being selfish, Emma. You always make everything about you. You're just trying to ruin this for me because you're jealous." And that was it. Something inside me shifted, snapped, really. The years of being the afterthought, of swallowing my pain, of being the one who compromised, who forgave, who stepped aside, all of it crystallized into a single, razor-sharp truth. They would never see me. They would never choose me. Not when it mattered. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I turned around, walked calmly up the stairs, and pulled out the largest suitcase I owned. I packed deliberately, methodically. Clothes, important documents, my books, my skincare, every item was chosen with care. I pulled photos of friends from the frames on my nightstand and left behind the family albums. As I packed, I could hear muffled laughter from downstairs, as though my heartbreak was just background noise. When everything was packed, I dragged my suitcase down the stairs. They all looked up at me, surprised. My father was the first to speak. "And where do you think you're going?" I paused at the door, hand resting on the knob. I turned and met each of their eyes. "I hope you'll all be very happy together," I said, my voice cold and clear. "Goodbye." Then I left, closing the door behind me for the last time. That night, I blocked all their numbers, my parents, Nicole, and Ryan. I erased them from my phone and from my life. Weeks passed. I stayed at Sarah's apartment while I figured out my next move. One morning, a thick, cream-colored envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me in ornate calligraphy. A wedding invitation. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. I dropped it straight into the trash. When word got out, when people learned what had really happened, many of our mutual friends, and even a few relatives, were horrified. They stopped speaking to my family. They stood by me. The carefully curated image of a perfect family that my parents had spent years constructing began to unravel. But I didn't stay to watch it fall apart. I had more important things to do. I threw myself into rebuilding my life from scratch. The first year was brutal. I lived alone in a cramped studio apartment, waking up some mornings with tears in my eyes and grief pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't lift. I missed the idea of my family, the one I thought I had. I missed Sunday dinners, board games, even the petty squabbles. I grieved not just the betrayal, but the illusion. But I also poured that pain into purpose. I was a junior associate at a small marketing firm, and I decided to rise. I took on every project no one else wanted. I worked late, I networked, I studied, grew, and evolved. Within 2 years, I earned a significant promotion. The raise allowed me to move into a modern, one-bedroom apartment in the heart of the city, a place that finally felt like my own. I began to thrive. I built new friendships, explored new hobbies, and traveled when I could. Slowly, piece by piece, I constructed a life rooted in independence and peace, a life that didn't revolve around approval or obligation, a life I loved. 5 years passed in silence. I was 34 now, a senior marketing director at a thriving company, confident, strong, content. With time, the sting of betrayal dulled. What once had been a gaping, bleeding wound transformed into a delicate, silvery scar, a quiet reminder of a war I had survived. I no longer woke up thinking about them. I rarely thought of them at all. They'd faded into background noise, like a haunting melody from a song I no longer played. They belonged to a chapter I had long since closed. Then, on a calm Tuesday evening, as I settled into my peaceful apartment and sipped tea with the soft hum of city life outside my window, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. I considered letting it go to voicemail, but instinct made me answer. "Hello," I said cautiously. There was a pause. Then a hesitant, fragile voice crackled through the line. "Emma." My entire body tensed. It took a few seconds for me to recognize it, but when I did, a chill ran through me like a cold wind through an open grave. It was my mother, 5 years. Not a word, not a text, not even a birthday card. And now this? "What do you want?" I asked flatly, my voice void of emotion. She exhaled sharply, trembling on the edge of hysteria. "Oh, Emma, thank God you answered. I need your help." I didn't have to ask. I already knew. It was always about her. "Let me guess," I said, ice thick in every syllable. "Nicole?" She broke then. Her voice cracked, desperation flooding every word. "Please, just listen. They're in trouble, serious trouble." I should have hung up right then. I knew nothing good would follow, but curiosity anchored me in place. So I listened as she spilled the story in a chaotic, rambling mess. After their wedding, Nicole and Ryan had taken the money they'd received as gifts to launch a boutique consulting firm. It was supposed to be their big leap into success and status, but they were amateurs. The business collapsed within the year. Instead of cutting their losses, they dug deeper. Personal loans, credit cards, shady investors. Eventually, in a last-ditch act of desperation, they turned to loan sharks. Now they owed over $90,000 to men who weren't interested in payment plans or polite collection calls. "They're making threats," she sobbed. "Everyone's helped what they can. Your father and I drained our savings. We even used the college fund we'd set aside for your future children. We thought maybe if they had help, if they had enough time." "Could you help?" she pleaded. "Please, Emma, we need to get these men off their backs." I stood silently in my living room. The city lights glimmered through my floor-to-ceiling windows. Everything was serene, controlled, beautiful. My sanctuary. And here she was, trying to drag me back into the wreckage they had made. I laughed. Not out of humor, but disbelief, the audacity. After half a decade of exile, their first words to me were a plea for money. The daughter they had discarded, the one they left behind. And now, they wanted a rescue? "No," I said softly, yet firmly. "What?" she gasped, as if the word had never been spoken to her before. "No," I repeated, louder now. "The answer is no." I could hear her struggling to understand. But we're family," she said, her voice cracking under the weight of her illusion. "How can you be so cold? This is about revenge, isn't it?" I took a slow breath, letting every syllable settle with clarity. "No, this is about boundaries. I am not going to set myself on fire to keep them warm. They lost the right to ask me for anything 5 years ago at my engagement party. I owe them nothing. Emma, please." "Goodbye," I said, and hung up. Then I blocked the number. My hands were trembling, not from fear, but from release. It was the final severing of a lifeline I had once desperately clung to. And I believed that was it. The end. But I was wrong. 30 minutes later, my apartment's intercom buzzed violently. I flinched, my cup of tea rattling against the saucer. I walked cautiously to the video monitor and checked the feed. And there they were, Nicole and Ryan, in my lobby, uninvited, unwelcome. They looked like ghosts of their former selves. Ryan was thinner, twitchier. His eyes scanned every corner like he expected to be attacked. Nicole's once glossy hair was disheveled, her clothes wrinkled and stained, her face pale and drawn. She slammed the buzzer repeatedly, panic overriding shame. When I didn't answer, she turned to the concierge desk, shouting my name at the man behind it. He remained calm, clearly trained for this. I watched him shake his head and point to the policy that prohibited guests from going upstairs without the resident's approval. Then Ryan did something that made my blood run cold. He pulled a thin piece of metal from his coat pocket and began fiddling with the main lock. My breath caught. A lockpick. The concierge sprang forward, shouting at him to stop, but Ryan shoved him aside with a wild grunt and pushed the door open. I backed away from the screen, heart pounding. This was no longer just a family crisis. It was a home invasion. I grabbed my phone and was about to dial 911 when a thunderous knock rattled my apartment door. They'd taken the elevator up. They were outside. "Emma!" Nicole screamed through the thick wood. "We know you're in there. Open this door. You owe us." The doorknob jiggled violently. My hands shook as I unlocked my phone and turned on the video recorder. I crept toward the door and opened it just a crack. Camera raised. "Get away from my apartment," I said, my voice shaking but loud. That was all it took. Ryan shoved the door open with brute force, knocking me backward. My phone went flying across the floor. He pounced, kicking it aside. "No phones," he growled, eyes wild, teeth clenched. Nicole charged in behind him, eyes manic. "You did this," she screamed, her voice shrill and broken. You ruined us. If you'd just given us the money, none of this would be happening. You owe me." She shoved me hard. I stumbled into the wall. She crumpled a document in her hands and shoved it into my face. "It's a promissory note," she hissed. "Sign it. You're going to handle our finances from now on. It's the least you can do after what a horrible sister you've been." Something in me clicked. A deep, primal survival instinct. My keys. They were on the side table, and on the keychain was something I had never used. A small gray plastic panic button. A feature I always thought was unnecessary. Until now. As Nicole raged and Ryan scrambled for the paper she dropped, I made my move. I dove for the table. Ryan lunged, reaching for my arm. He was too late. My thumb slammed onto the panic button, holding it firmly for the required 3 seconds. It made no noise, no flashing light or blaring alarm. But I knew. Somewhere in the security office downstairs, a silent alert had begun to pulse red, an emergency signal that screamed for help while the room remained eerily still. They didn't notice. Nicole and Ryan were still consumed by their own frenzy, their desperation making them blind. I stepped back slowly, the calm that washed over me surreal, almost detached. The chaos around me felt like it was happening in another room, another life. My voice, when it came, was steady, resolute. "It's over," I said. Ryan's laughter broke the moment like shattering glass, harsh, cruel, and bitter. "It's not over," he spat. "Not until you give us the money." I didn't flinch. Instead, a slow smile curled on my lips, cold and unshakable. "Oh, I wasn't talking about your little shakedown attempt." I lifted a hand and pointed to the hallway ceiling just above my door. They followed my gesture. There, inconspicuous yet unmistakable, was a small dome-shaped security camera. "I'm talking about this," I said, voice like ice. "Smile for the camera. This entire building runs a 24/7 surveillance loop." The blood drained from their faces. The realization hit like a punch to the gut. They looked from me to the camera, then back again, panic dawning in their eyes. Right then, a high-pitched alarm sliced through the hallway air, sharp, relentless, and designed to wake the dead. The building's response to my distress signal, and behind that sound came another, one that was music to my ears, the rising wail of police sirens, drawing closer by the second. They both froze. 2 uniformed officers stormed out of the elevator in under 2 minutes, stern-faced and focused. Behind them came the concierge, still rattled, pointing a shaking finger toward my open door. The officers assessed the scene in an instant, me against the wall, hair askew, phones scattered across the floor. Nicole and Ryan were frozen mid-action, caught red-handed. Nicole burst into tears. "Officer, thank God. My sister's lost it. She's trying to have us evicted. This is all a big misunderstanding." The officer didn't even look at her. His eyes stayed on me. "Ma'am, are you hurt?" I nodded, my voice returning as I gathered myself. "They forced their way into my apartment. They pushed me. They assaulted me." "That's a lie," Ryan snapped, the bravado returning. "This is a private family issue. It's about inheritance and—" The lead officer's hand shot up. "Sir, this family—" "Matter included you forcing entry into a secured building, assaulting the concierge, and attempting to gain access to a private residence without consent." The concierge, still standing nearby, spoke up. "We have everything recorded, from the moment they tried to break the lock." And just like that, it was over. The strength seemed to drain out of Ryan and Nicole. Their shoulders slumped. The fight evaporated. The officers moved quickly, handcuffing them with practiced ease. As Nicole's wrists were bound behind her back, she turned to me, her mascara-streaked face a portrait of disbelief and betrayal. "Emma," she whispered, "please. Tell them to stop. You can't let them do this. I'm your sister. I met her gaze. I looked at the woman who had once been my family, who had kissed my fiancé, smiled while I cried, and tried to force her failure onto my shoulders. I stared into her eyes and felt nothing. Not rage, not joy, not even triumph. Just a quiet, endless void where love used to be. They were escorted into the elevator, flanked by officers. As the doors slid shut, I felt something deep within me unclench. A weight I hadn't even realized I still carried disappeared. For the first time in 5 years, I was truly free. A week later, the doorbell rang. I checked the screen and my heart skipped. It was my parents. They looked older, tired, worn down, like people who'd seen their perfect world fall apart. I opened the door and let them in. They stepped into the space, eyes sweeping across the apartment. It was clean, stylish, and modern. Every inch of it was mine, built with hard work, late nights, and resilience. My father stood stiffly in the center of the room. The strong, unbending man I had grown up with now had tears glistening in his eyes. "We were wrong, Emma," he said, his voice thick and shaky. "So very wrong," my mother added, her tone flat, as if rehearsed 100 times. "After the arrest, people started calling. Your Aunt Carol, friends from church, old co-workers. They told us we had failed you. They said they couldn't believe what we did, and they were right. For the first time, they saw it. Not because they suddenly understood morality or empathy, but because their reputation, what they had valued most, was in ruins. The apology wasn't for me. It was for them. An attempt to cleanse their guilt, restore their image. I took a deep breath. Once, I would have wept. I would have accepted anything for a scrap of affection. But that version of me no longer existed. "I hear you," I said quietly. "I understand. But you're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry for how it looks." They opened their mouths to protest, but I raised a hand to stop them. "It's okay. I accept your apology. Not for you, but for me. I need to let this go. For my own peace." Their eyes widened, hopeful. But accepting an apology doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean returning to the past. That door is closed. The daughter you once knew, she's gone. They stood silent, absorbing the finality of my words. I walked them to the door. They didn't argue. There was nothing left to say. 6 months later, I hosted a dinner party in the same apartment. Sarah was there, along with a few close friends. People who had stood by me loved me without condition, my chosen family. We laughed over cheap wine and homemade pasta, stories and jokes flying like confetti. At one point, Sarah lifted her glass. "To Emma," she toasted, her eyes bright, "who built her own damn castle, moat and all." Everyone cheered. That night, after the laughter faded and the dishes were washed, I stepped onto my balcony. The city shimmered below, full of life. I gazed out, letting the cool night air settle around me. I thought of them. Nicole and Ryan. I'd heard, through the grapevine, that they avoided prison time. They took a plea deal that required financial counseling and mandated bankruptcy. They lost everything. Sold their car, their condo, even their furniture. In the end, they moved in with my parents. Their perfect life had collapsed like a house of cards in a windstorm. I didn't smile. I didn't feel glee or vindication. I just felt quiet. I thought about the family I had once longed for, and for the briefest moment, a flicker of sadness sparked in my chest. Not for them, but for the illusion I once clung to. But the sadness passed quickly, like a shadow drifting across the face of the moon. What replaced the sorrow wasn't bitterness or anger. It was something far more powerful. A deep, unwavering sense of peace took root within me. I no longer sought their approval like a lifeline. My sense of self-worth wasn't entangled in their acceptance. My joy didn't hinge on the affection they failed to give. I had discovered it within myself, step by painful step, rebuilding a life where I was the architect of my own peace, my own happiness. I turned and walked back into my apartment. The soft lighting, the scent of fresh basil from the dinner earlier. It all felt safe, sacred. When I closed the door behind me and slid the deadbolt into place, it didn't echo like it once did. It wasn't a sound of isolation or protection anymore. It was final. It was empowering. That click was the punctuation mark on a sentence I had written myself. This life is mine. Thank you for being here and listening to my story. It's been a long road, full of hurt, but also healing. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic family member for the sake of your own peace? Share your story in the comments, and if mine spoke to you, like and subscribe for more.